My name is Natalie Harper, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in my car across the street from my childhood home in suburban Denver, and my hands won't stop shaking. Through the front window, I can see the house blazing with light, hear the distant sound of laughter and music floating through the cold November air. There's a party happening inside, a big celebration with at least 30 people. It's my father's 65th birthday party, and I'm not invited. In my lap sits an envelope containing proof of a $10,000 wire transfer I sent 3 months ago to save that house from foreclosure. My younger sister Bryn told our parents that if I came tonight, she would leave. They chose her. I paid $10,000 to save their home, and they repaid me with betrayal. Before we dive deeper into how I got here, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments because I love knowing this story is reaching people everywhere. And if you've ever felt undervalued by your own family, if you've ever been the one who gives everything and gets nothing back, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I share these real stories about family drama, betrayal, and finding the strength to choose yourself. Trust me, what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare actually began. 3 months before that devastating birthday party, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just gotten home from my job as a financial analyst at a tech company downtown. I was exhausted, looking forward to a quiet night with takeout and Netflix, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. Lorraine Harper rarely called me during the week, so my stomach immediately tightened with worry. The moment I answered, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her voice was shaking, thick with tears, and between sobs she managed to tell me that they were about to lose the house. My father Eugene had been laid off from his job at the manufacturing plant 6 months earlier, and despite his best efforts, he hadn't found steady work since. They had burned through their savings trying to keep up with the mortgage payments, but now they were 2 months behind. The bank had sent a foreclosure notice. They had 30 days to come up with the missing payments plus penalties, or they would lose the home they'd lived in for 37 years, the house where my sister and I had grown up. My heart broke for them. I could hear my father's voice in the background, and he sounded defeated in a way I had never heard before. Eugene Harper was a proud man, a hard-working man who had provided for his family his entire life. Asking for help was killing him. My mother kept apologizing, saying they had explored every option, talked to the bank about refinancing, looked into assistance programs, but nothing had worked fast enough. They needed $10,000 immediately to stop the foreclosure proceedings. Without hesitation, I told them I would help. I didn't even need to think about it. These were my parents. They had raised me, fed me, put a roof over my head for 18 years. How could I not help them in their darkest hour? I had been saving diligently for years, living in a modest apartment, driving a used car, packing my lunch for work instead of eating out. My savings account had exactly $12,847 in it. I had been planning to use that money as a down payment on a small condo, finally have a place of my own instead of renting. But that dream could wait. My parents couldn't. The next morning, I went to my bank during my lunch break and initiated a wire transfer of $10,000 directly to my parents' mortgage company. I kept $2,000 for emergencies and rent, and I sent the rest without a second thought. When I called my mother to tell her the money was on its way, she burst into tears again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. She put my father on the phone, and his voice cracked as he said words I'll never forget. "You're our rock, Natalie. We'll never forget this. We'll pay you back within a year, I promise you that. You saved us." That evening, I drove to their house, and my mother had baked my favorite lemon cake as a thank you. My father hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, and for a moment, everything felt right. I felt proud. I felt like I had done something meaningful. I was the responsible daughter, the one they could count on, the one who showed up when it mattered. My younger sister Bryn, who was 28 at the time, lived in a trendy loft apartment downtown. She worked as a yoga instructor at an upscale studio and was always posting photos on Instagram of expensive brunch spots, new workout clothes, weekend shopping trips to boutiques I couldn't afford. When I mentioned the foreclosure situation to her in a text, asking if she could contribute anything to help, She responded that she was completely broke, that her rent had just gone up, and that she was barely making ends meet herself. I didn't push it. I didn't judge her. Everyone's financial situation is different, and I genuinely just wanted to help our parents. If I could handle it alone, why make Bryn feel guilty? But 2 weeks after I sent that $10,000 wire transfer, something happened that planted the first seed of resentment in my chest. I was scrolling through Instagram late one night when I saw that Bryn had posted a series of photos from Scottsdale, Arizona. She was at some luxury spa resort, lounging by a pool with a cocktail, getting a massage, posing in front of a desert sunset. Her caption read, "Much-needed self-care retreat. Sometimes you just have to invest in yourself." The photos were gorgeous. She looked happy and relaxed, and I felt a flicker of something ugly twist in my stomach. She was broke? She couldn't contribute even $500 to save our parents' home, but she could afford a weekend spa getaway in Arizona? I tried to push the feeling down. Maybe she had used credit cards. Maybe a friend had paid. Maybe it was none of my business. But that small flicker of resentment didn't go away. It just sat there, waiting. 6 weeks after I sent the money, I experienced my first real betrayal, though at the time I tried to convince myself it wasn't that serious. It started with a casual conversation at work. I was grabbing coffee in the break room when my coworker Denise mentioned that she'd seen photos on Facebook of a big Harper family dinner at some fancy steakhouse downtown. She said it looked like a great time, asked how the food was. I stood there with my coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips, completely confused. I hadn't been to any family dinner. I didn't even know there had been one. Denise must have seen the look on my face because she immediately got awkward and changed the subject, but the damage was done. As soon as I got back to my desk, I pulled up Facebook and searched for the posts. Sure enough, there they were. Photos from 2 nights earlier, a big family gathering at Sullivan's Steakhouse, one of the most expensive restaurants in Denver. I counted 12 people in the photos. My parents, my sister Bryn, my Aunt Patricia, my Uncle Raymond, several cousins, family friends. Everyone was dressed up, smiling, holding wine glasses. There was a photo of my father laughing with his arm around Bryn. There was a photo of my mother looking elegant in a navy dress I'd never seen before, and I wasn't in a single one. My hands were shaking as I called my mother during my afternoon break. I tried to keep my voice calm, tried not to sound accusatory, but I could hear the tremor in my words. "Mom, was there a family dinner last night at Sullivan's?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then my mother's voice came back defensive and flustered. "Oh, honey, it was just a small thing, very last minute. We didn't want to bother you." A small thing? I had seen the photos. There were 12 people there. Aunt Patricia lived 2 hours away. This wasn't last minute. I took a deep breath and said as calmly as I could, "Mom, I saw the photos. There were 12 people there. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Raymond, all the cousins. That's not a small thing." Another long silence. And then my mother sighed in that exasperated way that made me feel like I was being unreasonable for even bringing it up. Finally, she admitted the truth. Bryn organized it. She said she wanted some intimate family time. You know how she is. I felt like I'd been slapped. "And not intimate family?" I asked. My mother's voice got tight. "Don't be dramatic, Natalie. You know how Bryn is. She's been stressed lately." She said having you there would create tension. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tension? What tension? What had I done? I had saved their house. I had been nothing but supportive. I hadn't even seen Bryn since before the loan. What possible tension could there be? My mother wouldn't give me a straight answer. She just kept repeating that I shouldn't make this into a big deal, that we would all have dinner together soon, that I was being too sensitive. The conversation ended with me feeling confused, hurt, and strangely guilty, as if I had done something wrong by being upset about being excluded from my own family gathering. My mother promised we'd plan something special, just the 4 of us, soon. That dinner never happened. Over the following week, I tried to piece together what had actually happened. I called my cousin Randall, who had been at the dinner, and after some gentle prodding, he admitted what Bryn had told everyone. Apparently, my sister had been going around saying that I was too judgmental, that I made everything about money, that I had a superiority complex because I had a good job. She had painted me as this uptight, critical person who would ruin the fun vibe of the evening. Randall felt bad telling me, but he thought I deserved to know. The irony was crushing. I made everything about money. I had just given $10,000 to save our parents' home, and hadn't mentioned it once to anyone outside the immediate family. I had never thrown it in their faces, never demanded special treatment, never even asked when they planned to pay me back. But somehow, in Bryn's twisted narrative, I was the villain. I tried talking to my father about it. I called Eugene one evening when I knew he'd be home from his job search activities, and I carefully explained how hurt I was. I thought he would understand. I thought he would see how unfair this was. But instead, he sighed and said almost the exact same thing my mother had said. "Your sister is going through something right now. Just give her some space. Don't make this into a bigger issue than it needs to be." I wanted to scream. Give her space? She was the one who had organized a family dinner specifically to exclude me. She was the one spreading lies about me. But according to my parents, I was supposed to just accept it and move on. That was the moment I started to pull back emotionally. I stopped calling as often. I stopped sharing details about my life. I started to realize that maybe, just maybe, my place in this family wasn't as secure as I had always believed. Over the next month, the distance between me and my parents grew wider, and I couldn't understand why. Phone calls became shorter and more awkward. My mother stopped sharing family news with me. When I asked how things were going, I got one-word answers. My father seemed distracted every time we talked, like he was just waiting for the conversation to end. I started to wonder if I had done something terribly wrong without realizing it. Maybe I had been too pushy about the dinner exclusion. Maybe I should have just let it go. I was spiraling into self-doubt when my Aunt Patricia called me one afternoon, and her voice was filled with a fury I had rarely heard from her. Patricia was my father's older sister, a straight-talking woman who had never been afraid to call out family nonsense. She had been at that steakhouse dinner, and apparently, she had been watching what was happening with increasing disgust. "Natalie, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "I can't stay quiet about this anymore. Do you know what your sister has been doing?" I told her I had some idea, that I knew Bryn had said I was judgmental. Patricia made a sound of disgust. "It's so much worse than that, honey. Bryn has been conducting a full-scale whisper campaign against you for weeks. She's been telling your parents that you're holding the loan over their heads, that you walk around acting like you're better than everyone because you saved them. She told your mother that you've been complaining to your coworkers about having to bail out your deadbeat parents." I felt the blood drain from my face. None of that was true, not a single word. I had never mentioned the loan to my parents after I sent it. I had never complained to anyone at work except my best friend Kelsey, and even then, I had only mentioned it once in confidence. I certainly had never called my parents deadbeat. The accusation was so absurd it would have been funny if it wasn't destroying my family relationships, Patricia continued, and I could hear the anger in her voice. "Your sister is jealous, Natalie. She has always been jealous of you. You're successful, you're independent, you have your life together. And your parents enable her because she's the baby of the family. They've always made excuses for her, and now she's learned that she can say whatever she wants about you, and they'll believe her." I felt tears burning in my eyes. I thanked Patricia for telling me and hung up, then immediately tried to figure out what to do next. I couldn't just let these lies stand. I had to defend myself. So, I did something I rarely did. I demanded a family meeting. I texted both my parents and said we needed to talk in person, that there were serious misunderstandings that needed to be cleared up. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near their house the following Saturday afternoon. I came prepared. I brought printed bank statements showing the wire transfer to the mortgage company. I brought my phone with screenshots of my minimal text conversation with Bryn about the money. I brought a list of dates and times when I had supposedly been bad-mouthing my parents, ready to prove I had been at work or elsewhere. I thought if I could just show them the facts, they would see the truth. But the meeting was a disaster from the start. My parents sat across from me in the coffee shop booth looking uncomfortable and defensive. I laid out everything calmly and clearly. I showed them the evidence that I had never held the loan over their heads. I explained that Bryn's accusations were completely fabricated. I asked them point-blank why they would believe her lies over my proven track record of loyalty. My father wouldn't make eye contact with me. He stared at his coffee cup like it held all the answers to the universe. My mother fidgeted with her napkin, folding and refolding it. Finally, Eugene cleared his throat and said in a quiet voice, "We're not saying we believe Bryn completely, but you have to understand, she's very sensitive, she feels things deeply. Maybe there's been some miscommunication." I stared at him in disbelief. Miscommunication? She had accused me of things that never happened. There was no miscommunication. There were lies. But before I could respond, my mother jumped in with something even more shocking. "Maybe you could apologize to her, just to smooth things over? Even if you don't think you did anything wrong, it would help with family harmony." I felt like I had stepped into an alternate reality. Apologize? For what? For saving their house? For being slandered? I looked at both of my parents, these people who had raised me, who had taught me right from wrong, and I didn't recognize them anymore. "I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do," I said quietly. "If you choose to believe Bryn's lies over the evidence I've shown you, that's your choice. But I won't pretend I'm guilty to make her feel better." The conversation ended badly. My mother got tearful and accused me of being stubborn. My father said I was making things harder than they needed to be. I left that coffee shop feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. That was the first real betrayal from my parents. They had chosen Bryn's false narrative over my proven sacrifice, and somewhere deep in my chest, something started to break. 2.5 months after I had sent the $10,000, I received a text from my mother that initially filled me with hope. The message was cheerful and casual, completely at odds with how strained things had been between us. She said that my father's 65th birthday was coming up in 3 weeks, and they were planning a big celebration at the house on Saturday evening. Family and close friends would be there, and she hoped I could make it. For a moment, I felt a rush of relief. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe this party would be a chance for all of us to move past the awkwardness and hurt feelings. Maybe we could start fresh. I immediately texted back that I would absolutely be there, that I wouldn't miss it for anything. I started planning right away. I took that Saturday off work. I went to an upscale men's store and bought my father an expensive watch, something he would never buy for himself. I had it engraved with a message that read, "To Dad, who taught me the meaning of family." I picked out a nice dress. I even volunteered to help my mother with setup or cooking, whatever she needed. But 3 days before the party, my hopeful anticipation turned to ashes. My mother called me in the evening, and I could tell immediately from her strained voice that something was wrong. "Honey, we need to talk about Saturday," she said, and my stomach dropped like a stone. I knew. Somehow, I already knew what was coming. My mother took a deep breath and continued. "Bryn is very upset. She says she can't be at the party if you're there. She's really struggling right now, and she doesn't feel comfortable being around you." I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles went white. "What? Why? I haven't even seen Bryn in 2 months. I've been giving her all the space you asked for. What did I possibly do?" My mother's voice got defensive. "She says you've been hostile to her. She feels unsafe around you. She's very emotional right now, Natalie, and your father really wants Bryn at his birthday party." There was a long, horrible silence while I processed what was actually being said. Finally, I forced the words out. "So you're uninviting me?" My mother made a sound of protest. "We're not uninviting you. We're just asking if maybe you could sit this one out. For your father's sake, he doesn't need stress on his birthday. Has been through so much with the job loss and everything. We just want it to be a nice, peaceful celebration." I felt like I was drowning. My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "I paid $10,000 to save your home." There was a pause, and then my mother's tone shifted to angry defensiveness. "And we're grateful. But that doesn't mean you get to hold it over us forever." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm not holding anything over you. I have never even mentioned it, not once." "This is insane." My mother's voice got sharper. "Well, Bryn feels differently, and right now, we need to think about family harmony. We need to think about what's best for everyone, not just you." I wanted to scream that I was family too, that I was the daughter who had sacrificed her own dreams to save them, that I had been nothing but loyal and supportive while Bryn spread lies and manipulated them. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They had made their choice. My mother tried to soften the blow by saying they would plan something special, just the four of us, later. A private dinner or maybe lunch, something where we could all talk and work things out. But even as she said it, I knew it was a lie. That special dinner would never happen. This phone call ended with me sitting on my couch in stunned silence. The engraved watch sat in its gift box on my coffee table, mocking me. My father's birthday party was in 3 days, and I wasn't allowed to go, not because I had done anything wrong, not because of any legitimate conflict, but because my sister, who contributed nothing to saving our parents' home, had decided I was inconvenient, and my parents, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had chosen her comfort over my dignity. That was the second major betrayal. That was the moment I realized I would never be enough for them. Saturday evening arrived, and I spent it alone in my apartment, staring at the walls. I had taken the day off work, and now I had nothing to do but sit with my hurt and anger. I tried to distract myself with television, but nothing could hold my attention. I tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. Finally, around 6 in the evening, I opened a bottle of wine and poured myself a large glass. I sat on my couch with the wrapped gift still sitting on my coffee table, the engraved watch that would never be given. My best friend Kelsey called around 7, and when I told her what had happened, she was absolutely horrified. "Please tell me you're not just accepting this," she said, her voice filled with outrage. "Please tell me you're going to do something." But what was there to do? I couldn't force my way into a party where I wasn't wanted. I couldn't make my parents see how wrong this was. I felt helpless and small and utterly defeated. Around 8 in the evening, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just sit in my apartment wondering what was happening. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to witness the party I had been excluded from. So, I did something I'm not proud of. I got in my car and drove to my parents' house. I want to be clear, I wasn't planning to crash the party or make a scene, I just needed to see it. I parked across the street, far enough away that no one would notice my car, and I sat there in the darkness. The house was blazing with lights. Every window glowed warm and golden. I could see shadows of people moving inside. I could hear the distant sound of music and laughter. Cars lined both sides of the street. This wasn't a small gathering. This was a major celebration. I sat in my car for over an hour, just watching. Through the front window, I could see into the living room. I saw my father standing near the fireplace, surrounded by friends and family, laughing at something someone said. He looked happy and relaxed, healthier than he had looked in months. I saw my mother moving through the room with a tray of appetizers, playing the perfect hostess. She was wearing that navy dress from the steakhouse dinner, and she looked beautiful. And then I saw Bryn. My sister was at the absolute center of everything. She was taking selfies with cousins, hugging aunts and uncles, playing the role of devoted daughter. At one point, I watched her hug my father, and he kissed her forehead with such obvious love and pride that I felt physical pain in my chest. No one looked sad that I wasn't there. No one seemed to even notice my absence. The party was going perfectly without me. The worst moment came around 9:15. I saw a car pull up and my cousin Marcus got out. Marcus was supposed to be on my side. After Aunt Patricia had told him everything that happened, he had called me and said he was disgusted by how Bryn was treating me. He said he would talk to our parents, that he would stand up for me. But there he was, walking right into that party like nothing was wrong. He hugged Bryn. He shook my father's hand. He joined the celebration without a second thought. Even my allies weren't really allies when it came down to it. I sat there in my car with tears streaming down my face, and I finally understood the truth. My money had been welcome. The $10,000 that saved their home had been gratefully accepted. But I, the person who gave it, was disposable. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I scrolled to the transaction history and found the wire transfer. $10,000, transferred 3 months ago, with the memo Harper Family Emergency, Mortgage Rescue. Below it were all my other transactions. The modest life I lived, the packed lunches, the used car payment, the cheap rent, all so I could save money, all so I could help the people I loved, and they had thrown me away like garbage to please my spoiled, manipulative sister. I drove home that night with a clarity I had never felt before. I was done crying. I was done making excuses for them. I was done hoping they would suddenly see my value. It was time to take control of my own life, even if that meant walking away from the family I had always tried so hard to protect. That night, sitting in my apartment with the evidence of my exclusion fresh in my mind, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to cut them off completely. Not out of spite, not to punish them, but because I finally understood that I deserved better than this. I deserved to be in relationships where my love and sacrifice were valued, not exploited. And if my own parents couldn't provide that, then I needed to find it elsewhere. Sunday morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't confused. I was angry, but it was a clean, clarifying anger that gave me strength instead of breaking me down. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I knew that if I tried to have this conversation over the phone, my parents would talk over me, gaslight me, make me doubt myself. I needed to lay everything out clearly, in writing, so there could be no misunderstanding. I spent 2 hours crafting an email. I rewrote it multiple times, making sure every word was exactly what I wanted to say. The final version was calm, factual, and devastating. I recounted the $10,000 loan in specific detail, including the date, the amount, and the fact that I had sacrificed my own savings to help them. I listed every single time they had excluded me to please Bryn, from the steakhouse dinner to the birthday party. I explained that I had tried to understand, tried to be patient, tried to give Bryn space, but that none of it had been enough. I made it clear that I would no longer accept being treated as a second-class family member, someone whose value only extended as far as my bank account. And then, I wrote the most important part. I am removing myself from this family dynamic effective immediately. Do not contact me unless you are ready to take full accountability for how you have treated me and offer a genuine apology. I love you. But I will not continue to participate in a relationship where I am valued for what I can give, but not for who I am. I read it over one more time, took a deep breath, and hit send at exactly 9 o'clock Sunday morning. Then I closed my laptop and waited. The response came faster than I expected. My phone rang within 10 minutes. It was my mother. I looked at her name on the screen and made the conscious choice not to answer. She left a voicemail, and when I listened to it later, I was glad I hadn't picked up. Her voice was shrill with outrage. "How dare you send that email? After everything we've done for you, after we raised you and fed you and put a roof over your head for 18 years, this is how you repay us? With accusations and ultimatums? You should be ashamed of yourself." There was no acknowledgement of anything I had said, no reflection on their behavior. Just immediate defensiveness and counter-accusations. 20 minutes later, my father sent a text message. "Very disappointed in your attitude. We raised you better than this. Family doesn't abandon family over petty disagreements." Petty disagreements. That's what he called it. Being uninvited from his birthday party after saving his house was a petty disagreement, but the worst message came from Bryn. My sister, who had orchestrated this entire nightmare, sent me a text dripping with venom. "Finally showing your true colors. You were always jealous of me. You always wanted to be the favorite, and you thought money could buy it. Guess what? It can't. Hope your money keeps you warm at night since you don't have a family anymore." I read that message 3 times, and each time I felt a little piece of my remaining love for my sister die. This was who she really was. Not the fun, free-spirited yoga instructor she pretended to be on Instagram. This was a cruel, manipulative person who was willing to destroy family relationships to protect her position as the golden child. Within the hour, my mother called again from a different number. She must have thought I had blocked her primary line and was trying to catch me off guard. I let it go to voicemail again. This message was different, more calculated. Her voice was soft and worried. "Natalie, honey, your father is very upset. This stress isn't good for his heart. You know he has high blood pressure. If something happens to him because of this conflict, you'll have to live with that. Please, just call us back and we can work this out." It was textbook emotional manipulation, weaponizing my father's health to guilt me into compliance. But I had been reading about narcissistic family dynamics over the past few weeks, and I recognized the tactic immediately. This wasn't about my father's actual health. This was about making me feel responsible for their emotional reactions to my boundary. I picked up my phone and systematically blocked my mother's number, then my father's number, then Bryn's number. Each time I hit the block button, I felt a little lighter. I wasn't cutting off contact out of cruelty. I was protecting myself from people who had proven they would hurt me again and again. I sent one final text to my Aunt Patricia. I've cut contact with my parents and Bryn. Please don't try to mediate or convince me to reconcile. I need space to heal. I love you, and I appreciate your support, but this decision is final for now. Patricia responded within minutes. I understand completely. You deserve so much better than how they've treated you. I'm here if you need me, no questions asked. Take care of yourself, honey. That afternoon, my best friend Kelsey came over with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on my couch and talked for hours. She had been witnessing this slow-motion train wreck of family dysfunction for months, and she was relieved I had finally taken action. You know they're going to try to guilt you back, right? She said, sipping her wine. They're going to tell everyone you're the problem. They're going to play the victim. Are you ready for that? I nodded slowly. I know. But I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I've given everything I have to give. It was never enough. It was never going to be enough. So, I'm done. Kelsey reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. This takes real courage. For the first time in months, despite the grief and pain, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was sad, yes. I was mourning the family I wished I had. But I was also free from the constant anxiety of wondering when the next betrayal would come. Free from walking on eggshells around Bryn's jealousy and my parents' enabling. Free to build a life where my worth wasn't measured by my usefulness. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The peace didn't last long. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched as the fallout from my decisions spread through my extended family like wildfire. My parents, unable to accept any responsibility for what had happened, launched into full damage control mode. They told their version of events to every relative who would listen, and their version painted me as an ungrateful, vindictive daughter who had abandoned them over nothing. According to the story they were spreading, I had thrown a tantrum because I wasn't the center of attention at my father's birthday party. They conveniently omitted the $10,000 loan. They conveniently omitted Bryn's lies and manipulation. They conveniently omitted the multiple times they had excluded me to please my sister. In their narrative, they were the victims of a cruel and selfish daughter who had cut them off without warning or reason. Some members of my extended family bought the story completely. I started receiving text messages from relatives I barely knew, people who felt entitled to weigh in on my family business. My cousin Denise, who I hadn't spoken to in years, sent me a long message about how disappointed she was in me. I can't believe you're doing this to your parents after everything they've done for you. They gave you life. They raised you. They deserve your respect and loyalty. Family is forever, and what you're doing is unforgivable. My uncle Raymond, my mother's brother, sent an even harsher message. Your parents are heartbroken. Your father can barely sleep at night worrying about you. You need to apologize and fix this immediately. This is not how we raised you to behave. Family doesn't abandon family over petty disagreements. That phrase again, petty disagreements. It seemed to be the party line my parents were feeding everyone. But not everyone believed their version of events. My Aunt Patricia remained firmly in my corner, and she was not afraid to speak up. 2 weeks after I cut contact, Patricia organized a Sunday brunch at her house and specifically invited me. When I arrived, I found not just Patricia, but also her daughter Tessa waiting for me. Tessa was 30 years old, sharp and perceptive, and she had apparently been watching the family drama unfold with increasing disgust. Over mimosas and quiche, they both told me exactly what they thought. Everyone who matters knows what's really going on, Tessa said bluntly. Bryn has been a nightmare since we were kids. She's manipulative, she's selfish, and your parents have enabled her behavior for so long that they can't even see it anymore. Anyone with half a brain can see that you're the one who got screwed here. Patricia nodded in agreement. Your mother called me last week, crying, trying to get me to convince you to come back. I told her I wouldn't do it. I told her that if she wanted you back, she needed to own up to what she did and apologize. She got angry and hung up on me. I felt tears prick my eyes. Having someone validate my experience, having someone see the truth, meant more than I could express, but the family drama wasn't confined to private text messages and phone calls. Bryn, never one to miss an opportunity for attention, took the conflict to social media. She started posting carefully crafted Instagram stories that were clearly aimed at me without mentioning me by name. One featured a photo of her hugging our parents with the caption, "Real family shows up when it matters most." Another was a quote, graphic that read, "Blood is thicker than water and thicker than money." The implication was clear. I had chosen money over family. Never mind that I was the one who had given the money in the first place. Several mutual friends and acquaintances saw these posts and reached out to me, confused about what was happening. One former coworker sent me a message saying, "Hey, I saw your sister's posts. Is everything okay with your family? If you need to talk, I'm here." I appreciated the concern, but I refused to engage publicly. I wasn't going to air my family's dirty laundry on social media. I wasn't going to stoop to Bryn's level of passive-aggressive posting. My pain was private, and I intended to keep it that way. 3 weeks after I sent the email, a letter arrived at my apartment. It was from my mother, handwritten on her expensive stationery, the kind she saved for special occasions. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it and found 3 pages of the most masterful manipulation I had ever seen. The letter was a work of art in gaslighting. It started with declarations of love. "We love you so much, Natalie. You are our daughter, and nothing will ever change that. We miss you every single day." But then it shifted. "However, we are deeply hurt by the cruel accusations you made in your email. We have done our best as parents, and we don't deserve to be treated like villains. We made some mistakes, perhaps, but your reaction has been completely disproportionate." There was no acknowledgement of what those mistakes actually were. No specific apology for uninviting me from the birthday party or excluding me from family events. Just vague admissions that they weren't perfect, followed immediately by criticism of my response. The letter continued in this vein for 3 full pages. My mother wrote about how devastated Bryn was by my abandonment. She wrote about how my father's health was suffering from the stress. She wrote about how I was tearing the family apart and how I would regret this decision for the rest of my life. And then, at the very end, came the hook. "We want you back in our lives, sweetheart. We want to work through this. But you need to take the first step. You need to acknowledge that your reaction was extreme and hurtful. You need to apologize to your sister for making her feel unsafe and excluded. If you can do that, we can move forward as a family." I read that letter once, felt my blood pressure rise with every paragraph, and then I tore it into pieces and threw it in the trash. There would be no apology from me. There would be no crawling back to accept blame for things I didn't do. They wanted me to break, to come back on their terms, where I would be useful but invisible, where I would pay but never speak up, where I would sacrifice but never expect acknowledgement. I wouldn't do it. That night, I journaled for the first time in years. I wrote pages and pages about my feelings, about the family I had lost, about the grief and relief mixing together in my chest, and I wrote something that became my mantra over the following weeks. They want me back on their terms, where I'm useful but invisible, where I pay but don't speak, where I give but never receive. I won't do it. I won't shrink myself to fit their broken family system. I choose me. There was one moment of weakness. Late one Thursday night, around 11, I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand, my mother's contact information pulled up on the screen. I missed them so much it physically hurt. I missed the idea of family, the comfort of knowing I had people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My thumb hovered over the call button. I could fix this. I could apologize for things I didn't do. I could go back and pretend everything was fine. But then I remembered sitting in my car outside their house, watching the birthday party through the window. I remembered the watch, with its engraved message, sitting unused on my coffee table. I remembered my mother's voice saying that Bryn felt unsafe around me, and I put the phone down. Some things can't be fixed. Some relationships are too broken to save. 5 weeks after I sent the email cutting off contact, something unexpected happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was cleaning my apartment, listening to music, trying to enjoy my newfound peace, when there was a knock at my door. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I had learned to be cautious. But something made me look through the peephole, and my heart stopped when I saw who was standing in the hallway. It was my father. Eugene Harper stood outside my apartment door, looking older than I remembered, his shoulders slightly hunched, his face drawn and tired. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But curiosity and that small, stubborn part of me that still loved him won out. I opened the door. "Dad," I said, my voice neutral. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me with sad eyes. "Can I come in? I want to talk." I hesitated for a long moment, then stepped aside to let him enter. He walked into my small living room and looked around as if seeing it for the first time, even though he had been here before. I didn't offer him anything to drink. I didn't invite him to sit. I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks. Your mother and I, we miss you, Natalie. We miss having you in our lives." I waited for the apology. I waited for him to acknowledge what they had done wrong. Instead, he continued, "I know things got out of hand with the birthday party situation. But you have to understand, Bryn was really going through something. She was in a fragile place emotionally, and we were just trying to keep the peace." I felt a familiar surge of frustration. What was she going through, Dad? Besides being spoiled and entitled? What was this mysterious trauma that justified excluding me from your birthday after I saved your house? My father flinched at my tone. "That's not fair. She's your sister. She loves you." I laughed, bitterly. "She loves me? She's been spreading lies about me for months. She's turned you and Mom against me. She got me uninvited from family events." "That's not love, Dad. That's manipulation." Eugenia's expression hardened. "We're grateful for the money you sent, Natalie. We really are. But that doesn't give you the right to dictate how we manage family dynamics." And there it was, the real reason he had come. Not to apologize. Not to make amends. But to put me back in my place. "I never tried to dictate anything," I said quietly. "I just wanted to be treated with basic respect and inclusion. That's all I ever wanted." My father sighed heavily. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're being so sensitive about everything. We were just trying to avoid conflict at the party. It wasn't personal." I stared at him. "It was absolutely personal, Dad. You chose Bryn over me. You chose her comfort over my presence at your birthday. You chose her lies over my proven loyalty. If that's not personal, I don't know what is." The conversation was deteriorating rapidly. I could see the frustration building in my father's face. He wasn't getting the response he wanted. He had come here expecting me to cave, to accept his non-apology, and fall back in line. When I didn't, his approach changed. "Your sister says you've been resentful of her for years. She says you've always been competitive with her, always trying to prove you're better." I felt like I'd been slapped. That's a lie. I have never been competitive with Bryn. I've supported her through every phase of her life. I've celebrated her successes. I've never said a single negative word about her until she started destroying my relationship with you and Mom. My father's voice rose. "Don't call your sister a liar." And there it was. The bottom line. No matter what Bryn did, no matter how much evidence I provided, no matter how badly I had been treated, I was not allowed to speak against her. My father continued, his anger building. "You know what your problem is, Natalie. You think that because you have money, because you have a good job, you can look down on the rest of us. You think that loan gives you power in this family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I never said that. I never even mentioned the loan after I sent it. "This is exactly what Bryn told you," I would say. "Isn't it? She put these words in your mouth." Eugene stood up abruptly. "I came here to give you a chance to fix this. To be part of this family again. Your mother and I want you at Sunday dinner next week. All you have to do is come, apologize to your sister for making her uncomfortable, and we can move past all this." The audacity took my breath away. Apologize to Bryn. For what? For existing? For being excluded? for daring to defend myself against her lies? I'm not apologizing for things I didn't do, I said firmly. I'm not going to pretend I'm the villain in this story just to make everyone else comfortable. If you want me back in your life, you need to acknowledge what actually happened. You need to apologize for choosing Bryn over me repeatedly. You need to hold her accountable for her lies. Until that happens, we have nothing more to discuss. My father's face turned red. Then you're choosing to be alone. We tried, Natalie. This is on you. He turned toward the door, then paused and delivered one final blow. You know what the real tragedy is? We're your parents. We don't owe you an apology. We raised you. We fed you. We clothed you. And this is how you repay us. That statement hung in the air like poison. We don't owe you an apology, because in their minds, being my parents meant they were above accountability. Their role gave them carte blanche to hurt me, exclude me, believe lies about me, and I was supposed to accept it with gratitude because they had fulfilled their basic biological obligations decades ago. Please leave, I said quietly. Eugene looked at me for a long moment, and I saw disappointment and anger warring in his expression. Then he walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stood frozen in my living room for several minutes after he left. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing. That small part of me that had hoped for reconciliation finally died. They would never change. They would never see what they had done wrong. They would never value me the way I deserved to be valued. Later that evening, I received a text from a new number I didn't recognize. It was my mother, who had apparently gotten a new phone or was using someone else's to get around my block. The message read, "Your father tried to make peace with you today. You threw it in his face. You're tearing this family apart, and I hope you can live with yourself." I blocked the new number without responding. Then I called Kelsey, and I broke down completely. Through sobs, I asked her the question that had been haunting me since this nightmare began. Am I wrong? Am I the problem? Am I being too sensitive or too stubborn? Should I just apologize and go back? Kelsey's response was immediate and fierce. No, absolutely not. They came to your home and demanded you apologize for being mistreated. They offered no accountability, no recognition of their behavior, nothing. They're showing you exactly who they are, Natalie. Believe them. She was right. I had been shown, repeatedly, that my parents would always choose Bryn. They would always enable her manipulation. They would always sacrifice me to keep the peace. And no amount of money I gave them, no amount of loyalty I showed, no amount of love I offered, would ever change that equation. That night marked a turning point. I stopped hoping for reconciliation. I stopped checking my phone, hoping to see their names. I stopped lying awake, wondering if I had made the right choice. I knew I had. The grief was still there, sharp and painful, but underneath it was something new. A growing sense of clarity and self-worth that whispered, I deserved better than this. I deserved a family that saw my value, and if I couldn't have that with the people who raised me, I would build it elsewhere. 2 months passed after my father's disastrous visit, bringing the total time since the loan to 5 months. 5 months since I had wired $10,000 to save their home. 5 months since my life had been turned upside down by betrayal and manipulation, but these 2 months were different from the ones before. These months were about healing. I started seeing a therapist, something I had resisted for years because I thought I could handle everything on my own. Dr. Miranda Chen specialized in family trauma and narcissistic dynamics, and from our very first session, I felt seen and understood in a way I hadn't in months. She helped me understand the pattern I had been trapped in. You can't make people value you, she told me during one particularly impactful session. You can only decide what you'll accept, and by cutting off contact, you made a powerful statement. You decided you wouldn't accept being treated as less than. I started building a new support system, a chosen family to replace the broken one I had left behind. Aunt Patricia became a regular presence in my life. We had dinner together every Thursday evening, and she never pressured me to reconcile with my parents. She just listened, supported, and reminded me that I was loved. Her daughter Tessa became a close friend, someone I could text at any hour when the grief felt overwhelming. But the most important relationship I strengthened was with Kelsey. She had been my best friend for years, but through this crisis, she became more like a sister. The sister Bryn had never been. We started a tradition of Sunday morning brunch, just the two of us, where we could talk about anything and everything. She never judged me for the days when I felt weak and wanted to reach out to my parents. She just reminded me why I had made the choice I did. I also joined a support group for adult children who had been estranged from their families. I found it through an online search one desperate night when I felt completely alone in my experience. Walking into that first meeting in the community center basement, I felt nervous and exposed. But within minutes of listening to other people's stories, I realized I wasn't alone at all. There were dozens of us, people from all walks of life, who had been forced to choose between their mental health and their toxic family relationships. I heard stories that made mine seem mild. I heard about abuse, about financial exploitation, about manipulation that went on for decades, and I learned vocabulary for what I had experienced. Golden child and scapegoat. Those were the terms that made everything click into place. Bryn was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, whose feelings and needs always came first. I was the scapegoat, the one blamed for family problems, whose sacrifices were expected but never appreciated. It wasn't about anything I had done or failed to do. It was about roles assigned to us long ago, roles our parents needed us to play to maintain their dysfunctional system. 3 months after the cutoff, something unexpected happened. I received a certified letter at my apartment, official and intimidating. When I opened it, I found a letter from an attorney representing Eugene and Lorraine Harper. My heart sank as I read the legal language. They were formally demanding repayment of the $10,000 I had sent. According to the letter, they had reviewed their financial records and determined that the money had been a loan, not a gift, and they were within their rights to request immediate repayment. They gave me 30 days to return the full amount, or they would consider pursuing legal action. I sat on my couch staring at that letter for a long time, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me was devastated that it had come to this, that my parents would actually threaten legal action against me. Part of me was furious at the audacity of demanding back money they had accepted gratefully when it saved their home. But part of me also felt a strange sense of relief. They had just handed me the key to complete freedom. I consulted my own attorney, a sharp woman named Victoria Hayes who specialized in family law. She reviewed the wire transfer, the text messages, everything I had documenting the transaction. "Do they have any signed loan agreement?" she asked. I shook my head. No. They thanked me profusely and said they would try to pay me back within a year, but there was nothing in writing. I didn't think I needed a contract with my own parents. Victoria nodded. Legally, without a written agreement, this was a gift. They have no standing to demand repayment. We could fight this easily. She paused, looking at me carefully. But I sense you're considering just paying them back anyway. She was right. I had thought about nothing else since receiving that letter. If I pay them back, I said slowly, then we're even. They can never say I owe them anything. They can never hold this over me. It's worth $10,000 to have complete freedom from them. Victoria nodded. I understand that impulse, but make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't let them manipulate you into thinking you actually owe them this money. If you choose to pay it back, do it as a final statement, not as an admission of obligation. I thought about it for 3 days, and then I made my decision. I went to my bank and wired $10,000 back to my parents' account. This time, the memo line read simply, "Full repayment of all financial assistance. We are now even, do not contact me again." I watched my savings account balance drop, watched 2 years of careful saving disappear, and I felt nothing but relief. This was my declaration of independence. They wanted money instead of a daughter? Fine. They could have the money, and I could have my freedom. 3 days later, I received a brief email from my father. Just 2 sentences. Received the payment. Thank you. No apology for threatening legal action. No acknowledgement of the irony of demanding money back from the daughter they had discarded. No recognition that this transaction was severing our relationship permanently. Just a cold, transactional thank you. And that's when I finally, truly understood. That's all I had ever been to them. A transaction. A resource to be used when needed and discarded when inconvenient. My value to them had always been measured in what I could provide, not in who I was as a person, and that realization, as painful as it was, set me free. I took the money I had been saving for a condo, the money I had been rebuilding after the initial loan, and I booked a trip to Ireland. It was something I had dreamed about for years but always put off, always saved for some vague future date. But I didn't want to wait anymore. I wanted to do something purely for myself, something my parents would never understand or approve of. I spent 2 weeks hiking the cliffs of Moher, exploring ancient castles, sitting in cozy pubs, listening to traditional music. I journaled every day, processing my grief and anger, and slowly, painfully, beginning to heal. I sent postcards to Aunt Patricia, to Kelsey, to Tessa. I sent nothing to my parents. While in Ireland, I met a woman named Fiona at a pub in Galway. We struck up a conversation over Guinness, and somehow, the topic of family came up. When I mentioned I was estranged from my parents, she nodded with understanding. "Me too," she said simply. "Going on 4 years now." We talked for hours that night, two strangers bonded by the shared experience of choosing ourselves over toxic family relationships. Before we parted ways, she said something that stayed with me. The family you're born into is just luck, good or bad. But the family you choose? That's love. That's real. I returned home from Ireland lighter somehow. Still sad, still grieving the family I had wanted but never truly had, but no longer crushed by it. I started channeling my pain into purpose. I began volunteering at a nonprofit that provided financial literacy education to young women, teaching them how to save, how to budget, how to protect themselves financially. Every time I helped someone understand their worth and their power, I felt like I was honoring my own journey. I continued my weekly dinners with my chosen family, Patricia and Tessa and Kelsey and sometimes other friends. We laughed, we cried, we supported each other through life's challenges, and I realized this was what family was supposed to feel like. Safe, reciprocal, loving without conditions. 6 months after cutting contact, I finally felt ready to articulate the lessons I had learned. I wrote them in my journal, but they felt important enough to share here. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not out of spite or revenge, but out of self-preservation and self-respect. I learned that real family doesn't keep score. They don't measure your worth by what you can give them. They value you for existing, not for being useful. I learned that you can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. My parents will probably never understand what they did wrong. Bryn will probably never face real consequences for her manipulation. And that's not my responsibility. I learned that grief and relief can exist simultaneously. I'm sad about losing my parents, about the family dinners that will never happen, about the future moments they won't be part of. But I'm also relieved to be free from the constant anxiety and hurt. Most importantly, I learned that I'm worth more than what I can give. For so long, I measured my value by my usefulness. I was the responsible daughter, the one who saved the day, the one who sacrificed. But my worth isn't in my bank account or my willingness to set myself on fire to keep others warm. My worth is inherent. I deserve love, respect, and inclusion, not because I've earned it, but because I'm a human being. As I sit here now, 7 months after everything fell apart, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my parents will ever reach out with a genuine apology. I don't know if Bryn will ever mature enough to see what she did. I don't know if we'll ever be a family again. But I do know this. I'm done waiting for them to see my worth. I see it, and that's enough. I'm done hoping they'll change. I'm done making excuses for their behavior. I'm done shrinking myself to fit into their broken family system. I paid $10,000 to save their home, and they repaid me by choosing my sister's ego over my dignity. So I chose myself. I chose peace. I chose freedom. And I would make that choice again, every single time. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself, even when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally won't. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's finally understanding that you deserve better. And I do. I deserve better. We all do. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut off a family member because they were toxic? Have you been the scapegoat in your family while someone else got away with everything? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below because your experience might help someone else who's going through the same thing. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been made to feel guilty for setting boundaries with family. Remember, you're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You deserve relationships where your love is reciprocated, where your sacrifices are valued, where your presence is wanted. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. I hope you find the courage to choose yourself, just like I did. Take care of yourselves, and remember that chosen family is just as real as blood family, sometimes even more so. Until next time, stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never apologize for protecting your peace.